Dr. Audrieanna Burgin was recently named Chief Executive Officer of 90 Forward, and she takes the helm at a time of growing backlash to some of the group's foundational goals: diversity, equity, and inclusion. Welcome, Dr. Burgin. It's great to have you.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
So, I will say congrats on the job, but
Uh-huh.
also it seems like a tough time for
Mhm.
this job. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about um, what it means to be leading 90 Forward at this moment?
Yeah. Um, I am super excited and honored to be the new Chief Executive Officer of 90 Forward. I'm born and raised in Jacksonville my whole life. I love this city. I love the values that we stand on and the values that we're still building. I believe that adversity and challenges brings opportunity, and that's been the backbone of 904 since inception. Even the creation of 904 was a group of friends coming together to talk about issues and challenges, just like we're doing now. So to continue that legacy, take the helm from Dr. Kimberly Allen, who's a friend who I know is amazing and has been a supporter of mine. I feel honored and grateful to do that. Are there challenges ahead? Yeah, but we're gonna tackle those together.
Let's talk a little bit about Dr. Allen. She's been on
Mhm,
this program before, and she, kind of brought 90 Forward from its earliest days to its current moment, and through some challenges. The pandemic, the year of the protests for George Floyd's murder, and then
mhm,
kind of into this period, which is a lot of people see as a real reaction to and backlash to some of the progress that was made on the front of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But she is um, a mentor for a lot of people in this
mhm.
city. How did she talk to you about this handoff? How has she prepared you, and what did she tell you? What advice did she give you?
Yeah, we had, several private conversations. I'll give you some, not all. I will say that me and Dr. Kimberly Allen have been friends for a few years. I was leading some diversity, equity, inclusion stuff, and she was too, and I can't remember exactly how we got connected, but we bumped into each other and we locked in, supporting each other, as leaders in this space. She has been an amazing, I would call her a champion of mine, and I would call myself a champion of hers. And the advice that she gave me, she told me that she felt like I was the perfect fit, and she felt like under the organization that she trusted me with her baby, is
Wow.
how she put it. We had hours and hours of discussion from strategy to making sure this amazing team feels the stability and a powerful transition. I would say this transition was a transition of love and mutual respect and honor, and just making sure we fortified the work, because the most important thing is the work. So, from the board of directors to our volunteers to our amazing staff, everyone, it was a team effort.
The stated goal of 90 Forward is essentially, focusing on racism and ending racism
Mhm.
in Duval County, in Jacksonville. And that is an ambitious goal. It is, in some ways, it almost seems like an untenable goal. How do you balance, you know, strategy with reality when it comes to trying to solve the problem of racism?
Yeah. Racism is a big challenge to tackle. I think that for me, even in current times, I've been telling, my team and even people that also work in the space to stay strategic and focused and resilient, and not reactive. That's been my strategy, and literally the last 2 years. If we're reactive and we react to every single thing that's happening, particularly under this current administration, you'll be reacting about every 10 minutes. Some of it is an intentional distraction, an intentional emotional trigger. So for me, I built up my emotional intelligence muscle like it is strong, you know, and I built my internal circle of community is strong. Diversity, equity, inclusion. I tell people it chose me. I didn't choose it. I fell in love with making sure the generations that came behind me had a better experience than I had.
Mm.
And that's from my undergraduate years to my graduate school and to everything. I wanted people to have a better experience than I had, and that is what 904 was created on. Again, like conversations. Let's talk about it and figure it out. So that's what we've been doing. 904, as you stated, Dr. Kimberly Allen led this organization through George Floyd and so many other racial tensions, even the Dollar General shooting we had here in our own city. We were at the helm of that, leading people through and having the difficult conversations, and also talking about being a part of the conversations of the past and the future. The racial healing and the discussions and the education that we provide, but also making sure 904 is a part of the conversation of what's next for Jacksonville and beyond. So that's what I would say.
If you're just joining us, I'm talking to Dr. Audrieanna Burgin. She is the new CEO of 90 Forward here in Jacksonville. If you have questions or comments about 90 Forward or the work ahead, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937, or you can email comments or questions to First Coast Connect at wjct.org. You can also reach out on Facebook, Twitter, or I guess it's X now, at FCC On Air. I want to ask you, Dr. Burgin, you talk about, wanting people to have a better experience than you did. And I wonder kind of like when you in your own personal life sort of came to the issue of racial equity, at what age that was, if there was some particular triggering or formative experience that kind of got you into that world.
Yeah, that's a great question that I love. So I'm born and raised in Jacksonville. I went to Riverside High School. And Riverside High School at the time, this was 2005, 2007, so don't quote me, but it's probably about 95, 97% African American, right? And when I went to UNF, University of North Florida, and I started studying economics, I was the only Black kid in a lot of my classes. So that was the first time I noticed, and it was a little bit of a culture shock for me, right? Being totally surrounded by my community. My parents were pastors, so I was totally immersed in the Black community. We were serving others. Um, it felt good. So to go to University of North Florida and then have this stark experience of, I'm the only one, was the first time I was like, this is different. I was fortunate to have community. I was fortunate to be in my hometown. So I had support outside of that. But it was difficult for me to adjust. And only 1% of PhDs in economics go to Black females. So that disparity has followed me my whole career. That led me to coming back to the University of North Florida and starting the diversity in business program that we led in the Cotton College of Business, again, from having conversations. And at that time, the administration within the Cotton College of Business wanted to increase the diversity and again change the experience for the students that were coming, behind me. So that was powerful as well. So that was the first time that I noticed it. So then I went to my graduate program at Florida State University, only Black female in the cohort. And when I
And
graduated,
again, you were an economist.
I'm an
This is
economist.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And there I started studying, racial issues because now I'm like, how do we
What's
change this?
mhm.
What is it? Like I tell people all the time when you're doing research, a lot of times people get into the what, and the what sometimes is lower level, but when you're a researcher, you get into the why, and that's powerful. So that's the first time. But I tell a funny story that when I was graduating with my doctoral degree, I said, "Ooh, I'm done. I'm gonna get out in the field, and I'm gonna have more diversity." And I ended up being, like, the only Black researcher at my next job, and I was like, "You have got to be kidding me." And me and my sisters, we it's not funny, but you have to laugh through it sometimes. So I don't wanna get comfortable being the only, and doing the work that we're doing at 9 Forward and throughout the community is a part of that. Yeah.
And a big part of your research, when you were working on your doctoral degree was on the connection between educational attainment and and money, finances,
Yeah.
either whether it was when a young person, as a child, whether their parents were of means or had money, whether, being married impacted somebody's financial circumstance, and how race was an element in some cases of those same circumstances. So that was really interesting research. Can you just kind of tell us what it was you found, particularly when it comes to the formative years for young people,
Yeah.
and opportunities?
Yeah, thank you so much. I love talking research. I could talk research all day. So I would say my dissertation was intersectionality. Excuse me. And what I love about economics is literally all around you. You can find economics in anything. So for me, I wanted to study where education and labor intersected, where parental wealth and education intersected. But in a lot of the papers that I wrote, using updated data. Because a lot of times we try to say this is no longer a relevant issue. We're talking about something from the 1960s, but a lot of my data, tripped over into the 2000s.
Mhm.
So one of the most powerful things that I'm proud of that I found was parental wealth during ages 0 to 5 was the strongest predictor of college graduation, right? And it was powerful for me because a lot of times we focus on students that are already in the high school age, and we put so many resources into that. But what we found was the resources in the household when the child was literally an infant to 5 years old had such a big, profound impact. So it talks to us about, how a lot of times the racial disparities, our generations are lagging before they even get to the classroom. So that's what I wanted to say with that piece.
I wanna take a couple of calls if we can. One, from Tiffany in downtown. Good morning, Tiffany. Go ahead.
Good morning. Good morning. Congratulations once again.
Thank
My
you.
question is related to on last night, Ordinance 2025-138, which was the requiring unauthorized aliens in Duval County that are receiving federal grants, ultimately for agencies not to be able to receive those funds
Mhm.
for unauthorized aliens. My question to you is: last night it was clear, excuse me, there's still a lot of tension, a lot of pain in
Mhm.
our city as it relates to topics like this,
Yeah.
including race. Race came up a lot last night in the city council meeting. What would be your strategy on just kind of working with the city of Jacksonville, particularly even our city council,
Mhm.
as we pass ordinances like this to try to mend some of that pain?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Tiffany. I would say me personally, even before entering this role, and Dr. Kimberly Allen was as well. I sit on Mayor Donna Deegan's African American Advisory Board, and to me, solving the issue of race and disparities in the city is a problem for all of us. Not just Now Forward. So it takes everyone, and it takes cross sector collaboration, which is what I feel like you're talking about, and it takes cross sector partnerships. That's private, that's business, that's the philanthropic sector. I also serve on the board of the Nonprofit Center of Northeast Florida, where Don Lockhart is the CEO there, and she used to be strategic initiatives for the previous administration. So having people in my corner that help me with strategy, with working cross sector, and bringing different people to the table, even if you don't expect them at the table, and even if it's not the table they would normally sit at, is important for me, as we make sure that 904 is a part of the conversation of what drives Jacksonville forward. The history of 904 has been racial healing and having the conversations. I think the frustration that we see a lot of times in communities of color is that we try to move on to the next thing without talking about how we got here and how the dysfunction and the tension and the frustration got here. So I think it's important that all communities feel heard, particularly, the African American community, just speaking of my lived experience. So I think having conversations where voices are uplifted, and we can also have the forward conversation on what happens now is gonna be powerful.
I wanna take a call from Susan in Fruit Cove. Good morning. Go ahead, Susan. Susan, are you there? I think we've lost you. You can try back if you'd like. I wanna ask you a little bit about the issue of the city council vote. And, there are conversations that I think some people find difficult because they believe that they are built around a topic that is kind of more politically salient than real.
Mm,
That this is a conversation that's being had to make some sort of political gain or a political point. Um, and I think that the people that opposed this bill believed that this wasn't necessarily, a financial concern so much as one that piggybacks on national and statewide
mm,
stated issues about immigration.
mhm, mhm.
And so I just curious. I mean, it's your job to kind of help these conversations, and when
Yeah.
the conversations don't necessarily feel authentic to people
Mm.
on one side or the other, I would guess that makes it more difficult.
Definitely, authenticity is key. Truth is key, and our board chair, Dr. Mara Martello, is heavy in the immigration sector. She's of the Hispanic community. She's a dear friend and colleague of mine. I want to say she was there fighting the fight last night and commenting and standing up. For us, 904 it has been at the racial helm of every community of color, of every minority group, not just African American, not just Hispanic. So we've been serving everybody and having conversation in each space, and we want to continue to do that.
The research that you've done, I think it's interesting when you talk about people using current data,
Mhm.
because there is this sense, we've made progress, and perhaps looking at data from the 70s or the 80s or the 90s even, and saying, well, that doesn't really apply because we've made great progress since then.
Mhm.
And so you said you really wanted to find data that reflected current realities, economic realities, but that is, I think, also part of the conversation. I think that 90 Forward tries to, I think, inform whether we really are at an inflection point that is measurably different,
Yeah.
or if things are more similar than some people would like to think to kind of how they've always been.
Yeah, and I got that question from someone else about what progress I feel like excuse me, we had made, and I think some progress has been made. I can't say no progress has been made, but I will say that certain persistent racial disparities still exist, and that is what that research wanted to speak to, because even what we're talking about now are policy implications, right? How does research show up in policy? How does the conversation and what the community wants show up in the laws and how we govern ourselves? And unfortunately, sometimes to have true change, we have to prove it. And one of the ways that we prove it is through data. I've had some of my research cited and used to push different change forward, whether it's nonprofits or grants and things like that. So the work is to push the conversation forward and I say unfortunately, but sometimes validate what we know is the truth, but we're made to prove, through research.
One thing that you talk about, changing and progress being made. You went to Riverside High, which for many, many years wasn't called Riverside High.
Yeah.
It was named after a foundational member of the KKK.
Mhm.
And there were attempts to change it over the years that failed, because people thought that it was, integral piece of history. And that's a conversation that is always difficult in Jacksonville. It seems, particularly around issues, um, anything that has to do with kind of history slash heritage, is often seen as a counter narrative to conversations about, racial healing.
Mhm. And I think that was a moment where the community lifted up their voice and asked for change. I remember a little bit of the process. I was around kind of finishing my doctoral degree, so I was back and forth between here and Tallahassee. I would like to say, don't quote me, but I want to say 90 Forward had some part in several changes, to the schools, and was behind that. And I want to say Dr. Kimberly Allen was a part of those conversations and facilitating discussion. But and if I remember the process, it was lifting up the voices of the students, the staff, the community, and they lifted up their voice and change happened. So that is the type of progress. When we say has there been progress, there's a literal proof of that.
What are some of the initiatives that 90 Forward, has been known for that you plan to continue? I mean, they've had, this race card project. They've had this ongoing partnership with the Equal Justice Initiative, which is, kind of an effort to commemorate and remember lynchings that happened,
Yeah.
here, but around the country. Are those initiatives that you are going to continue? Do you have a plan to broaden or change some of those?
Yeah, I would say yes and yes. So, race cards, we're actually in discussion right now how we reimagine that.
And we should probably
Um,
explain what that is, because
Yeah, so it's literally, there's an app, but it's literally a deck of cards that helps you have a race conversation, right? So we're like, how do we have these discussions? How do we reduce tension? We literally created a deck of cards, and just like you would any game where you're getting to know someone, it does it in a fun way, but in a way that's structured and it helps you have that discussion. So we're looking at what that looks like in a digital age, because everybody's really digital right now. So we're super excited about that. More to come. This is just week 2 for me.
great.
So remember that. Our uh I'm sorry, what was the other one? You said equal initiative?
Yeah, the
Equal.
Equal Justice
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Initiative. Yeah.
So we're still doing that. We have another one planned for August. I can't say much about it yet. But that project is really what introduced me to 904. I went to one of the soil ceremonies in either 22 or 2023.
And can you
And
explain to for people who don't know what the soil ceremony is, how that's done, the collection?
yeah, yeah. So basically, there were lynchings that happened in Jacksonville, Florida, that were classified as other types of, murders or deaths. So 904 went back and had them classified as lynchings, and then they have a soil ceremony at the site that represents two things. One, the idea that that person's remains are there in some way, so they collect the soil, but it also represents a rebirth, of soil and what grows from even pain and trauma, which is the racial healing part that 904 stands on. So for me, it powerful. I mean, just powerful. Afterwards, I remember we had like a discussion about race and let people just open up and explain what they were feeling in the moment. It is an experience. So we're still working on that. We have another ceremony coming up in August, so stay tuned. I would say what I'm going to add, I'm an economist, so you're going to see an influx of, economic mobility, which is basically just opportunity, making sure everyone can thrive and making sure everyone has a seat at the table. I'm on economic development projects throughout the city of Jacksonville, so making sure even the conversations, the healing, and the work that we do is connected to tangible impact and measurable output that people can feel. So that's what I wanna do.
The work that you did when you kind of came back to UNF,
Mhm.
you were the founding director of UNF's Diversity in Business program, and that's kind of a community of support for students of color. I'm curious if you can kind of tell us, what that work was, and well, let's start there. First of all,
Yeah.
what was the work that you
Yeah, yeah.
did?
So remember I said that one of the first, experiences I had with understanding racial equity was when I got to UNF, and in my economics courses, I was the only black student in a lot of those classrooms. I never forgot that, right? So, when they found out I was in the city and and I was, finishing up my PhD, they called me to teach. And when I got there, they said, "We also have this program." UNF will get you like
By the
that.
way, right?
Yeah, yeah. We also have this program that we're trying to launch, where we really want to increase the diversity of the incoming students coming to the campus. We want to make sure the students here have support, and we want to focus on their post-secondary success, and early career transition. And I was like, I'm in. I am in. And I want to shout out Travis Williams, who's the current CEO of LiftJacks. He helped us get the founding dollars for that.
He was
Uh,
also just appointed.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so I was trying to tell people how special that was because we are actually real friends.
Yeah.
And he supported my candidacy for 904 very strongly. He's a well-respected voice in the city, so he helped us get, some of the founding dollars from that. He helped us secure $50,000 from Kids Hope Alliance, and, um, and we did some, work with them on helping students that were coming through their programming understand what the degrees were. Like, what does it mean to get this type of
Oh,
degree?
interesting.
So, interesting projects like that, and then, we had $700,000 from CSX that was secured for that program, so we were well funded, we were doing great work. The legislation changed that program
Now
that
tell us what that means for people who aren't following this as
yeah.
closely as some what's
So,
legislation are you referencing?
the okay, I wanna call it the the right name. The laws passed by the DeSantis or, administration that pretty much dismantled DEI at the higher ed level, that wiped out DEI across the state and several of the higher ed institutions. Even though we were privately funded, um, the attention, challenged the way we were able to do that work. So, I wanna say that program officially closed down last summer, last fall. Now, I don't know if a lot of people know, it's my understanding from the most recent laws because they change all the time, that students are still able to, create their own student-led organizations. So, some of the diversity, equity, and inclusion um, foundational programs we had at like the administrative level have been continued by the students, right?
Okay.
So you might have had like a women in business program that was run by a director. Well, that might not exist anymore, but a student can start a women in business society and they can get together and have the conversation. So it hasn't canceled everything, it's just transformed it, and it's put it in the students' hands, which I don't even all the way think is a bad thing, because there's some students on that campus that they're with it.
Yeah, 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 they know what they're doing. And
Yeah.
I do need to kind of make a note correcting a statement that I said because I was referencing Lehigh, which changed its name to Riverside, which is the school that you attended,
Mhm.
which has also got a Confederate tie. But I was actually referencing mistakenly Westside High School,
Oh,
which
okay, okay.
previously was known as Nathan Bedford
Okay,
Forrest
got
High
it, got it.
School, which is named for a former foundational member of the
Mhm.
KKK. So just
Okay.
just to get clear on that. Um, so some of those things have changed.
Mhm.
How does it feel just to have kind of put that
Mhm.
work in? It had that investment, it had this
Mhm.
strong level of community support, and it's this I know that there are students carrying on some
Mhm.
elements of it, but it doesn't have the sanction, it doesn't have the backing, it doesn't kind of have the, the strength that it did when you were there. Uh
Yeah. At the time, it was a gut punch. Um, we had strategic plans, we had ideas, we were doing it, and it felt good. So at the time, it was a gut punch. It was disappointing. It was disheartening. Um, Again, at that time, I had amazing people like Tyler Morris and Dr. Kimberly Allen and Travis Williams and Kent James over at CSX that were personal supports for me. Personal, you cannot do this work without personal support, and confidants and advocates. Cameron Frazier, is my brother. So I had personal supports and advisors that helped me through it. Because again, it's a gut punch. You feel the emotion, but you got to remain strategic. And I have to keep a certain level of togetherness for the students, because the students are like, "Dr. Burgin, what's going on? What's happening? What about us?" So it's so layered. I don't think people realize how layered it is, because when you become a leader in this space, so many people, look to you for what's next. So that and remind you that's like 2022, 2023-ish.
Mhm.
So the rest of the nation is now feeling what Florida has been feeling for years. So that's when I tell people stepping into this role at 90 Forward, I know what I'm stepping into, and I this is not my first rodeo, with this. So and it was a big decision for me to make sure that I was even ready to step back into the space like this, because I can just wear my economist hat and be just fine and not step into the line of fire and not have the heat,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
not sit in a hot seat and make really good
Right,
money.
right.
you know but that's just not what I was called to do. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you think that your background as an economist will kind of change or flavor the work that you do at 90 Forward? I mean, do you think that that brings you a different skill set, and a different way to shape some of the conversations?
Oh, for sure.
Mhm.
And me and Dr. Allen had this conversation a lot. Every new leader brings a new era. It's just by design. And I've been fortunate enough to have a team and a board and volunteers and everyone embrace me and look to me like, what is your vision? That's been amazing. You don't always get that, particularly when the exiting CEO was a founder, right? That it's like the identities are woven together.
Sure.
I will say that I'm fortunate enough to be following someone that exited on their own will and had a great name
Yeah.
and was loved. So I tell people I'm riding in on love, but I'm gonna plant my feet, the way that I see. For me, economics changed the entire way that economics, and I'm not gonna do a lesson, but it just counts the costs that are not there. It's just a different way of analyzing situations.
What does that mean? It counts the costs that are not
Well,
there.
it looks at alternative. It's what do we do in the face of scarcity? What decision could you have made? And that is the type of strategy that is gonna fortify not a forward in my opinion. I believe that my connections to the business sector, I started out in business. My first degree was in business management. I took an economics class and fell in love again. And that led me to economics, you
Which
know.
is saying something because, like I said, looking over your thesis, the number of calculations and formulas is just kind of mind-numbing. I mean, it's a lot of math.
Thank you. Economics is a lot of math. But again, I think I'm passionate about economics as a science. It's a way of thinking. I get to apply it to whatever I want to apply it to. So I choose to apply it to education, to race, to labor, a lot of places that it's not always applied to.
Mhm.
I had an amazing dissertation chair, Dr. Patrick Mason. I want to say he's at University of Massachusetts now. But he made me think about my lived experience in everything that I wrote. As my lived experience as a Black woman is all throughout my research. My lived experience as a Black woman is now all throughout my life. So that's what pushes me forward.
And are there specific ways that you can think that the conversation around economic impact or economic cost will translate into the strategy that you're bringing to 90 Forward and the goals of that organization?
Yeah, I would love for 904, and we're talking about this internally now, so I might be giving you some exclusives, but we do community engagement really well, right? And a lot of times the city is pushing things forward, and then there's backlash from the community because they don't necessarily feel heard, right? And the city could be, business, whatever, different sectors. So for me, it's positioning us at tables that people don't think 904 should be at, but we are absolutely necessary for. In my previous job,
Can you give an example?
yeah, an example would be, housing affordability. We've been in that space a little bit, but not deeply. You think about the amazing work that Lift Jacks does. I'm an economist. It makes sense. Also technology. We're reimagining our race cars, but technology for the African American community as a resource. As if we look through COVID, a lot of the inner city schools didn't have enough laptops, didn't have enough resources. So positioning that, thinking of STEM for Black students, like those are tables that are moving forward and have a lot of energy in the city that you wouldn't necessarily place 904 at the table at initially, that I think we are absolutely necessary for.
Interesting. So you
Yeah,
want to be more a part of some of those conversations, perhaps?
absolutely.
And yeah,
And I've already been a part of some of them, but now that I'm in charge,
yeah, that's
I can do a little more. That was absolutely a joke for my team listening.
well. I know that there'll be a lot to follow up on in the months ahead, and we're giving you an early interview here
Mhm.
on all of the things that you've got planned. But it's great to meet you in person, Dr. Audrieanna Burgin. Thanks for being here. Congrats on the new job.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone listening and your questions. I had a wonderful time. Thank you, Ann.
Terrific. Thank you.